Hello, we have siding on our shed. We just finished installing LP Smart Siding. It's the same approach if you're gonna install T1-11 as well. So let's get right to it. And the difference between the two of them is that T1-11 boards is wood board. So that's gonna require some maintenance. You're gonna have to paint it and prime it every few years. Now, LP Smart Siding comes pre-primed. It's engineered wood with resin. And what that is it's termite resistant. This product it's gonna make your shed last much longer.
I start by measuring 1/4 inch down from the 2x6 ledger. That is because you want to have an overlap allowing water to run off beyond the non-pressure treated OSB flooring we just installed. I snap a chalk line all around the shed so I can visually see where the bottom of the boards are going to land. And because this is a one-man job, I added 2x4 blocks all around to help me lay the boards on it as I install them.
Before we start installing the LP Smart Siding, let's talk about the hardware we need for this. You want to use at least 1.5 inch siding nails. The beauty about this is that you can get them loose in a box like this and you can drive them with a hammer, or you can get them a coil of nails used for your nail gun if you have one. I'm going to take both approaches here and you can decide which method to use.
Time to lay out my first panel board. When laying out the panel, you want to make sure it's oriented so the next panel can sit on top of the previous one. I add one nail on one of the sides and I use it to pivot the panel to level position. To help pivot the panel, you can use your foot if you need. Once the panel is leveled, I added a second nail on the opposite side and then I can start nailing the panels in place from there. As far as nail spacing, I nailed the panels 16 inches apart going vertical, and on the top and bottom plate I nailed them every 8 inches. Time to bring in the second panel. You may have to readjust the supporting block. Whenever overlapping the two panels, you want to make sure that the next panel is touching the alignment bead of the previous panel. That allows for an 1/8 of an inch expansion gap. And when nailing the two panels together, you want to drive the nail between both panels at the same time. I then pivot the panel in place, check for level, add a second nail, and then I'm ready to finish nailing. One thing to note is whenever you're pivoting these panels in place, make sure not to put too much pressure on one corner, otherwise you break off.
We have the first two boards in. It's okay doing with a hammer. The thing is, I got 2.5 inch nails. That's the only thing I had in store. Remember, at least 1.5 inch nails. That makes drive it in much easier the shorter the nails. Next, we're gonna switch over to the nail gun, and the way I like to do it is do all the complete sheets, the full sheets first. Then we'll come back and do all the cuts.
I now bring in the third panel to be installed in the back of the shed. I put in two nails, the second one pretty loose so I can remove it when checking for level. Once the panel is level, I grab the nail gun and in the same pattern as before, I nailed the panel in place. The fourth and fifth panel are very similar to the first two I did on the other side. Obviously, this went much faster with the nail gun. One thing I noticed with the nail gun is that ever so often a nail would sink really deep. So I had to stop and readjust the setting on the gun. So if you are using a nail gun, just keep an eye out that you don't sink the nails too deep. It is time to install the two panels in the front of the shed. One thing I noticed before putting up the first panel is that the 2x4 cripple stud wasn't really centered in the doorway. I had to add a second cripple stud next to the one that was there because I like these front panels to be centered as much as possible. Installing these two front panels is pretty straightforward. There are only a couple studs to nail to plus the header. And at this point, I'm not cutting the doorways just yet. We're gonna do that later on.
And then this is my last full sheet. So let's go back around and go through the options we have on how to cut these boards, and you can make the decision which one's the best for you.
The first option cutting these panels is to use a skill saw. Measure the width needed for the panel, snap a chalk line, and run a skill saw through the panel. Then I nail the panel in place just like I've been doing so far. My second option is to cut using a sawzall. First, I need to nail the panel in place, and using a sawzall, cut it from the top going down. For this to work best, you need to set yourself up where you have leverage holding the sawzall and cut straight at the same time. I ended up cutting too much of the panel that was there already, which in this case is not a big deal because I'm gonna be adding trims to these corners. I also used the sawzall cutting the front panels. This worked much better and went way smoother. Next, I'm going to cut the doors using a skill saw, but this time the panels are already nailed to the wall. So what I do is drill few pilot holes around the opening on the inside, then go around to the other side and with the level connect the holes, mark the opening that we need to cut. And with the skill saw, I cut the door opening following the line we just traced.
And remember, this is her door, so save this board because we're gonna build the door from this board.
Now I'm installing my last panel. Make sure when nailing this panel to nail it every 8 inches around the whole window. And I suggest you do the same around the door. Just like the door, I drill few pilot holes around the window from the inside, and then on the outside I trace it with the level. I started cutting the window with using a sawzall, but I wanted to show how to cut the window with a jigsaw, so I grabbed a jigsaw and I finished cutting. In my opinion, the skill saw is the fastest and probably easiest way to cut it. There's also the option to cut it with a router if you have one. You now have seen few options on how to cut these panels. I hope this helps you when it's your time to build.
And as I said early on, LP Smart Siding comes pre-primed, so you do need to prime it if you make any cuts. You don't have to do that everywhere. If you're gonna cover with trims or caulk, that should be sufficient. However, if you don't do any of the trim work, you wanna go ahead and get some all-purpose exterior primer and just go ahead and prime the edges. And don't worry if you didn't get all of this. I'm making a material list and plans for this very shed, so make sure you check the description below. That should help you make an informed decision whether you want to make this build or hire it out. And you may be wondering, is this any cheaper than vinyl siding? Well, to actually help answer that, I'm gonna go ahead, remove these sheets on this wall and install vinyl siding. And that way we have numbers to compare which one is the most cost efficient and the best for your shed. If you wanna check that out, check out this video here. And if you wanna check out the whole shed build, you can check out this video. I hope this was informative to you. You learned a little something today, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.